moment I'm up here by myself, and that's because Peter promised us last week that we would have a special visitor. So this week, we do have a special visitor. Are you ready, boys and girls? Let's count down. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Our special visitor is Pedro. Pedro made it all the way from Uruguay, boys and girls. Do you know how long it takes to get here from Uruguay? Yeah, on a plane. Pedro and I were talking about that because I've gone to China. I was kind of curious about the flight from Uruguay to here. It took Pedro 14 hours to get from Uruguay to get to Miami, which Miami's still a bit away, and then it took another 5 hours. So Pedro's a little tired. That was a pretty long flight. But Pedro's excited to be here with us because it's missions conference, boys and girls. We are super duper excited that it's missions conference. There are so many things for you to learn and know and people for you to meet. I hope that you get to meet all the different people here at church, boys and girls. Well, Pedro and I, we brought along a few things to show you. You'll notice Pedro's wearing a Uruguay shirt. Makes sense since Pedro's from Uruguay. I have one on that says Beijing. I happened to be in Beijing the year before the Olympics in 2007. Did you go to the Olympics, Pedro? Then what? I'm from China. Oh, right. Pedro came most recently from Uruguay, but Pedro's originally from China. We had to clear that up a little bit. That's right, Pedro. Pandas come from China. We got that. But Pedro most recently came from Uruguay. So we have a shirt from, can you figure it out, boys and girls? How about those of you who take Spanish at school? Yeah, Spain. Pedro speaks Spanish. And we have a shirt here from Mexico. I got that one. I got to go on a missions trip to Mexico. And then we have a shirt from Germany. So we brought along a few things we wanted to show you, boys and girls, as we talk about missions around the world. So, Ms. Krupnik, you keep throwing out the word missions, and you keep talking about other countries. What does the word missions, or what is a missionary? A missionary is someone who tells others about Christ, about the Bible. That's right, Pedro. Some people make it their job. The missionaries that we're talking about this week at church and we're getting to meet, that's their full-time job. That's their occupation, is to travel and tell others about Christ. But boys and girls, we all have a responsibility to tell others about Christ. God has given us his word and he wants all of us to tell. Well, Pedro, I thought since I've been to China 4 times to teach English and you're from China, that maybe I should pick a missionary from China to tell a story about. Yes, Pedro? Do you speak Chinese? Pedro asked if I speak Chinese, and the answer would be no. No, when I went to China, yes, you speak Spanish. It's true. Do you speak Chinese, Pedro? Oh, Pedro speaks Chinese and Spanish. Pedro's much smarter than I am. We'll give Pedro credit for that. All right. Good job, Pedro. Good news is when we get to heaven, boys and girls, we will all understand each other and we won't have the language barrier. But a missionary to China. So I was thinking about one, and her name is Gladys Aylward. So I had this book in my classroom. I grabbed it off the shelf to bring along with us. And she was headed to China. Okay, boys and girls, I am located, I know not everybody is, in Michigan here, and I've had the opportunity to travel to China to teach English, and China is way over there. Well, Gladys Aylward wanted to go to China. She wanted to be a missionary. She knew about the people in China. She knew that they needed to hear about Jesus. They needed to hear about the Bible. And she was burdened. She'd pray, and she knew God wanted her to go. So she talked to the people in England, where she was from, the China Inland Mission, and they're like, okay, you can start a 3-month training program. She goes through her 3 months. She is just so excited, boys and girls. Gets to the end of the 3 months, and the China Inland Mission tells her, you can't go. Wait, what? She's done this preparation. She's trained, and they told her no. Do you know why they told her no, boys and girls? It's because she struggled with the language. They said she didn't know enough of the Chinese language to be able to go. And they told her she couldn't. Wow, how discouraging that would be for Gladys. Well, they wouldn't support her. They wouldn't send her, but she knew God had called her to do that. She had a confidence. So boys and girls, she worked super hard. She worked for a man named Sir Francis Younghusband is his last name. And she worked and worked and worked and saved up all the money she could. You know what she saved up her money for, boys and girls? To get on a train. She used her life savings to take a train from England and get over. She had to ultimately travel from England to China, but she's traveling on the Trans-Siberian Railroad. She is going by train across Russia. Well, she has saved up her life savings. She gets on this train. Well, it's still difficult. It's still not simple for her. It's not like, yes, I'm on the train. I'm going to get there. We're going to get started. On the way, the train gets stopped. And an enemy she's worried about getting captured. She's worried about getting taken captive. So she has to find help. Well, now she's in Russia. Boys and girls, she doesn't speak Russian. She speaks English. She needs help. I don't know if I were you, boys and girls. I think I'd be pretty discouraged at this point. But she keeps going. That's right. She has to pray. She asks God for help, and God is with her every single step of the way. Well, it actually ends up that some Japanese people help her. They take her by boat, and she ends up getting to China. But it wasn't the way she had planned. The railroad was supposed to take her right to China, but she had difficulty along the way. Well, she gets to China, and she's going to work with a lady named Jeannie Lawson. So there's another single missionary lady. She goes there to help, and they want to help these travelers, these people. So they decide they're going to start an inn. Like a hotel kind of, a motel was kind of what we would think of it as. They start this inn, and it's called the Inn of the Eight Happinesses, which to us kind of translated a little different, a little funny out of Chinese. I don't know about you, but I've never seen an inn called the Inn of Eight Happinesses, but it had to do with the virtues. Well, they started this inn to bring in travelers, and so the travelers come, but ultimately, remember, boys and girls, they're wanting to tell them about Jesus. So what they do is at the inn, they feed them dinner. When they sit down for dinner at night, they tell them the stories from the Bible. And they use those Bible stories, which the Chinese people in general love stories. They have many traditions and things that are passed down through stories. So the Chinese people who were staying at the inn, they would listen. They were super excited to hear the stories that came from the Bible. So they would listen to what Jeannie Lawson and what Gladys Aylward had to say. Well, it ends up that Jeannie Lawson gets sick and she passes away. And Gladys is left there essentially by herself. Okay, the only English-speaking person there, although by now she's picked up on the Chinese and she is able to speak the language, but she feels alone and by herself, and she feels like she can't keep things going. How can she keep on? And she prays. That's right, Pedro. She prays and she asks God for guidance, and it kind of came in a different way. It was actually a government official who came with a special job. He said, "I've got a job for you." She's like, okay. I mean, she knows she needs money. She needs the support to stay there. And the job he had for her was to be a foot inspector. That's what all of you want to grow up and be, right? A foot inspector. Well, no. What? Did you get your feet inspected, Pedro, on your way here? No, I didn't get my feet inspected. How about you, boys and girls? You ever had your feet inspected? No, I don't need to inspect them, though. Thank you, Pedro. You can put your foot down before you fall. No accidents on camera. That's before and after. But Anyways, she's the foot inspector, which to us sounds like a weird job. What it was is they had a tradition where they would bind the feet. Basically, it's kind of like wrapping the feet so they wouldn't grow. Well, it was very painful for the girls, and they had decided that this would, yeah, that's right, Pedro. They had decided that this was not a good custom or a good thing to carry on. So the man wanted Gladys to be the foot inspector. Well, let's think about this for a second. She's going to travel from one house to the next house, to the next house, to the next house. The government's going to pay her to do it. But as a missionary, boys and girls, what do you think she's going to do when she visits each one of those houses? That's right, Pedro. She's going to tell them about Jesus. How neat is it that God was working out this plan where the government of China was paying for her to give the gospel? That's pretty incredible when we think about how God works out all those details for us. Well, there is more to her story. I'm going to have to tell it and fast forward. Some of you already thought I talk fast. I do. My poor students. But a war breaks out. Oh wait, even before the war, she had some pretty dangerous jobs, Pedro. Do you know one time there was an outbreak in the prison? The men in the prison were fighting, and it was almost like a war zone inside the prison. And you know who they go and get? They go get Gladys Aylward. They're like, she has such a good reputation. And you know what? God used her to help with some prison reform, and she had the whole prison audience. They're a captive audience. She had all of them to give the gospel to. God used her in so many ways. Well, this kind of last little tidbit I want to tell you, she's leading 100 children. A war had broken out. World War II had broken out. And the Japanese were attacking, and she had 100 orphan children that she was taking care of. And by herself, she led 100 orphan children through the mountains. Boys and girls, do you want to guess how many miles she traveled with those children? 5? Longer than 5, Pedro. She traveled 100 miles on foot with those children, trying to get them to safety. While she did get them to safety, even though she was actually injured along the way, she still safely delivered those 100 orphan children. While as a result of the war and some things that happened, she had to go back to Britain. She stayed there until her mom passed away, but her passion was for China. She had to get back to China. Well, some different things happened along the way, and she wasn't allowed back in. So she ended up in Taiwan. But boys and girls, she still had a passion for children. She started an orphanage there, the Gladys Aylward Orphanage, and she helped even more children until she passed away. Boys and girls, it's a story, and I jam-packed her life into a very small segment of time. If you have a chance to read her book, you should learn more about her. I hope you get to meet the missionaries this week at Missions Conference. You know what? The Bible has really neat stories in it. But is it just meant to be a storybook, Pedro? No. Are these missionaries just here to tell us stories to pique our interest? No. These missionaries are here to inspire us, to teach us, to help us, but ultimately because they want people to know about God's Word. What about you, boys and girls? Do you know about Jesus? Do you have a relationship with Him? It starts there. Having a personal relationship with Jesus. And then do you tell the people around you? Who have you told about Jesus? Who have you invited to church so they can hear about Jesus? Maybe, boys and girls, it's even as simple as you pull up one of these, normally Peter Panda, but today it's Pedro Panda, YouTube videos, and you show it to a friend. There are lots of ways, boys and girls, that even as children, you can tell people about God. But what about praying for the missionaries? When you meet a missionary this week, maybe it's an adult, a man or a lady, but maybe you meet one of the children. Will you pray for them? As they go to another country, will you pray that God would protect them? Would you pray for the different missionaries? Well, we are super excited that you were here, Pedro. Thanks for joining us. Do you have anything you want to tell the boys and girls before we sign off for today? Pedro's hungry. All right, I better help Pedro get some food. Maybe we can find something that Pedro would like. What do you think, boys and girls? Well, he's here in America. What should we introduce Pedro to? How about Coney Island? Yeah, that might be a good one. All right, have a great week, boys and girls. Come back for missions.